All right. After technical difficulties, back with episode 3. So, Granddaddy, just tell us the story of how you met grandmother and how all that went down.
All right, so I'm happy to, and let me ask you, did any of our prior okay,
No,
we're starting
no.
from again.
This is scratch.
All righty. Well, precious grandmother, I, I could talk about her forever and never cover it all. And I wanted to mention to anyone who's interested, your mom told me yesterday, refresh my memory, that while I was out in the country, I had dictated some detail of all of our meeting and my secretary typed it, so your mom and her sisters have a fairly good detail. But to try to summarize a wonderful lengthy uh, activity, I knew all about grandmother before I ever had even seen her. Our mutual friend Evelyn Chapman, who your mom and her sisters have called Aunt Evelyn over the years, had as her life's work making sure that grandmother and I met and fell in love and married. So I knew all about grandmother. She was up at Baylor. She was a senior at Baylor, and I was a junior at U of H. And Aunt Evelyn was on my back all the time to ask her for a date, to get it started. And I just wasn't comfortable with it. I could not imagine that grandmother would give me the time of day, and I wasn't about to be embarrassed. So she came home and graduated from Baylor, and she and I were in the same Bible class. It was an activity called Training Union on Sunday night for Baptists, and it was a deal where everybody in the room, large group, stood up and talked about 5 minutes, gave a little talk on some biblical principle. So I saw grandmother and heard her sweet little voice, and boy, I instantly knew everything Aunt Evelyn said was true and a lot more. But I just could not fathom grandmother being interested in me, so I never called for a date. I had other girlfriends, and I knew were available, and I just didn't want to be embarrassed. So one Sunday night, neither one of us had a date. It was a great place to take a date for a free date. Church had a social after, and so no money outlay. So when it was all over with, grandmother and I were walking toward the elevator. She had come with her friend Doris Herron, and all three of us were walking toward the elevator. And grandmother said, "Roy, if you're not with anyone, sit with Doris and me." So I said, "You bet." So we did sit. Doris went in first, then grandmother, and I was in the aisle seat. And I couldn't believe it. Grandmother was just looking at me and chatting and talking and showing a lot of interest. So my heart is fluttering, you know. So when church was over, I said, "Well, are you staying for social?" And she said, "I will if you will." So I said, "Okay." And then during the social time afterwards, neither one of us paid any attention to anyone else. We just talked and talked. And grandmother was walking in a circle. I guess we were both nervous. I was getting dizzy, spinning around, keeping up with her. So when that was over, I said, "Well, Margaret, uh, tell Doris I'll take you home." And she said, "Okay." And we did. And so driving home, I'm thinking, okay, there's my chance. It's either now or never. And so I said, "Grandmother, here's my deal. Let's go out a few times, and if we like each other as much as I think we will, let's get married and have a family."
So wait, so you said that the first time you met her.
Oh yeah, first time we really had visited.
So was that like customary at the time that like marriage was like instantly discussed or like
No,
that
not
just
at all. Not at all. Quite the contrary. Typically, in those old days, you courted a girl. you know, you built up slowly and spent a lot of time around her and the family. But, you know, my thinking was, okay, Lord, this is my chance. Am I going to foul it up? So, so anyway, I said that to her. And her response was, sound like a deal to me. And so, you know, as that famous Chinese philosopher said, the rest is history. We dated a few times. She, in a short time, she reserved the church, and so now we're 65 years this year.
So how long from when you met to when you got married?
Well, son, I have it all marked on a calendar, 1959 calendar that I framed, and I've got a file, and it's in that memo I mentioned to your mom and her sisters. Very short while, very short while. It was just a matter of days, maybe a couple of weeks, till she reserved the church, and then we were married in August. There's sort of a funny little story, and I don't want to ramble too much, but somewhere in all that, I heard that grandmother had mentioned a December wedding. We had church for August, but she mentioned a December wedding. And I thought, oh, me, she backing out, she backing out. And your precious great grandmother, your grandmother McGee, fantastic lady. So she and I just were, I loved her. We were famous together. She said, sweetheart, what is this I hear about a December wedding? And so your grandmother said, well, you know, that would give us time to know Roy better and more time to plan. So your grandmother McGee said, baby, we don't need any more time, and we know all we need to know about Roy. Don't change the deal. And so we didn't. So here we are,
So
65 years later.
so during that time, like people were very supportive of y'all's like getting married. Like there wasn't any, no one was like y'all are rushing it. Y'all it's too soon.
Well, that is a really, really good question, son, uh, because I, I believe what your friends think is really fairly significant. A lot of our family members have met their spouse or their spouse to be because the friends lined them up.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're in school with a prospective mate and your friends know that person, but everyone was incredibly supportive. I was amazed. Your great grandparents were sort of pillars of that church, so they knew everybody, and so people massively came up to us, and oh, they thought it was terrific, terrific. I never heard anyone say anything negative.
Well, that's such a great story. So you had mentioned other girlfriends and like stuff. So were you like going out with anyone before you met grandmother?
Well, son, there are two sides to that. On the one side, I had lots of girls in my life. You know, I love girls. I had massive girl cousins and sisters and aunts, and uh, I knew all the girlfriends of my little sisters, and yeah, I like girls. I always have liked girls, and so yeah, I had a lot. But it's important to say the other extreme though. I never let any girl on. No girl thought she had any kind of commitment from me. Your grandmother is the only girl I ever said, I love you. I never said that to any other girl, and you know, maybe this is too personal, but it's good for you young men. I never had a relationship with any other girl except your grandmother, both before and during our marriage.
Well, that's great.
So yeah, I had a lot of girlfriends, and I was a normal young man. I wanted to get married when I finished uh, high school. I don't mean high school. I mean college. I wanted to get married when
Because
I finished college.
you got married your senior year, or you had already graduated?
I had just graduated. I graduated in May or June, and then we were married
So
in
how old were
August.
you, and how old was grandmother?
Well, I guess we were both 22. Uh,
Because is she younger than you or older?
well, we're almost the same age. She is just a tiny bit older than I, but essentially
Yeah,
we'll both be 88 this year.
yeah. Well, that's great. So how did the wedding go?
Well, it was fantastic. It was at First Baptist Church, Houston. Weddings in those days were very, very nice, and your great grandparents did a super job for us. But weddings were at 8 o'clock, so you didn't serve a meal. You had cake and punch and uh,
So it was already
mince
dark.
and peanuts. So a lovely wedding, lovely, lovely, giant crowd. I had all my bank friends, and having lived in Houston since I was 7, I knew a massive number of people, and of course it was a really good spot in my career. The bank was very generous to us, gave us lovely gifts, so it was super, son.
Is there any like funny story or like interesting story that happened at the wedding? Like any drama?
Well, the only drama was my best friend Roy Eckert had married a girl who was Catholic at that time. Now she later became Lutheran, but she was Catholic, so I couldn't be in his wedding, and because I was Protestant.
But you could go.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
attended the wedding, attended his
Did he
wedding.
get married before you?
Uh, no, no, we were first. So anyway, though, the point was he was not in. Well, he was an usher in our wedding, but the best man was the fellow I'd mentioned to you before, Jack Mann, who,
Oh, he went to the Navy with him.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jack Mann, high school, college, Navy. So I was best man in Jack's wedding, and he was best man in my wedding. So that was the only drama that everybody expected Roy to be best man. You know,
Did he not really care? Like where y'all good
well,
with
son,
that?
I'm probably fouling the timeline up on some of this.
Yeah.
Uh, Granddad needs to think about things a little bit. But anyway, that was the only drama that my parents and everyone thought Roy would be my best man, and he wasn't. And now that I think about it, I think I've gotten it backwards, but that doesn't matter. So enough of that.
Yeah. So, did you guys, or after the wedding, did you guys go on a honeymoon, or like how
Well,
was
we
that?
did. Grandmother and her family had gone to a place in Arkansas called Lake Hamilton. Had this wonderful lake and resort property and so forth. And so they just loved it. So grandmother suggested it, and I thought it fantastic. And your grandmother McGee let us drive her new Oldsmobile. So we went to Lake Hamilton in Arkansas near Hot Springs in her new car, and it was delightful.
That's great. And how long were y'all? How long were y'all there?
Well, I would think about a week. I'm not sure, son. About a week, I
So
guess.
you left right after the wedding?
Yes, yes. The next morning, our wedding was at 8,
Yeah.
so time all the festivities were ended. It was sort of late to leave that night.
So was it like it was a lot of fun because like you kind of had just met grandmother, so like you were still getting to know her a little bit, or how was that?
Well, as you folks, young folks say, it was crazy. We're at our nice cabin where we stayed. A really nice place, air conditioning, which was sort of new to me. So we're going out to dinner, and I'm sitting on the bed, and I hear all this noise in the bathroom, and I had the crazy thought. I thought, there is a woman in that bathroom. And I thought, yeah, and she's your wife. So, it was all crazy but wonderful.
It seemed surreal at the time. You were like,
It
how did
really
this all
did.
happen?
It was like, I can't believe this. I'm on a honeymoon with Margaret McGee.
That's great. And like any interesting or funny stories from the honeymoon?
Well, the worst. It was terrible, terrible. Uh, we went skiing, we'd gone water skiing before as one of our dates. Because I was really into water skiing and boating. Uh, so grandmother was a good skier almost instantly. She you don't think of your grandmother as being athletic, but she was extremely athletic. She was a good skier. She jogged with me. She's faster than I was, and I was a track runner in high school. But she's in the water, and I pushed the ski to her. And the second it left my hand, I knew I was in trouble. That ski hit the water and then hit her right in the mouth. So here I am on honeymoon with my little bride, and her mouth is bleeding.
Was it, how bad was it?
Well, it was sort of bad. We had to get it treated and bandaged and everything.
You had to go to the hospital?
Well, son, my memory's terrible. I think we went to an emergency room. But yes, she had it
So
attended
you were
to.
like swimming in the water and you just like pushed the ski and it hit her in
Well,
the...
she was in the water and I was in the boat.
Oh, and you threw it to her?
Yeah, she lost the ski, so I
Was she like screaming and crying and all?
no, she handled it beautifully, and she was telling me it's fine, it's fine. And
That's
I'm
good.
thinking, oh, no, what have I done? And I'm envisioning, boy, when her mother sees this, she's gonna kill me. But everybody very sweet about it, very understanding.
So right after that, after your honeymoon, like y'all got back, did you already buy a house or like were you like how did that go down?
Well, son, in those days, you didn't have these giant apartment projects. So we wanted to rent first and save our money and buy a house ultimately. So we found this really precious little 12 unit apartment, had carports, and it was right on the bus line. And, as I've stressed, we were trying to save every nickel. So we wanted to only have one car. We put both cars up for sale. Mine sold, and we kept grandmother's. But it was on the bus line, so she would zip me over to Medical Arts Building. This apartment was fairly close in toward town, in the OST area of Main Street. So then we bought a house some years later, and Aunt Susan and Aunt Alice were born in that first house. And by the time your mom was born, we'd begun to have, Lord had blessed us with some financial success. And grandmother was a stay-at-home mom at that point. She'd taught 5 years. So your mom was born out north in the Spring area in a nice new house.
That's great. So you get married and then you move into that house that you rented or that apartment, that 12 unit. And then when do you have to go into the military?
Well, we were in our first house, and our ship was called up for that Cuban crisis. And so grandmother stayed and cared for the house. And ultimately, she sort of did a mothball on it. And
What does that mean? I
well,
didn't
that
ask
just
last
means,
time.
sort of secure it and keep it weather safe.
Yeah.
And she moved in then with her parents and stayed with them while I was away.
So she didn't live alone.
No, well, for a while she did, and then
Because how long were you on the boat?
a year, about in round figures a year.
And did you ever get to go home during that time? Or?
Yes, it was a funny kind of Navy. Our ship steamed back to Galveston on several occasions, and so I got to come home and be with grandmother. It was sort of a rinky-dink Navy.
So yeah, you've told a couple stories about the Navy, but just tell me like how it was. Like what was the daily routine? Like, did you ever see any type of conflict or anything? Like what? Just tell me about that.
Well, if it weren't for missing grandmother, it really would have been a ball. Um, because I was in charge of the payroll office, I could stay on the base when I wanted to. Only 2 times that I went aboard ship if we were going to a nice place. If we were going to Bermuda or Jamaica, and I went to Jamaica numerous times, and Cuba, of course. We went to Cuba and spent a lot of time in Cuba. So I only had to go if I wanted to, or if a payroll period fell when the ship was out at sea, then I had to be on board to make payroll. So the only downside was just missing grandmother. I, Financially, I was better off than I'd ever been, and we saw lots of exciting places, and I was with people that I really liked, my best buddies.
Because what made you choose the Navy?
Well, partly I didn't want to be in the infantry,
Yeah.
and I really didn't want to be a pilot because if you were a pilot, you had to commit to 6 years active duty. So, plus, the Navy was very convenient. They had a ship in Galveston. It was only one weekend a month,
Yeah.
and I thought it would blend in nicely to career and all the things yet to come.
Yeah. So did they make you like you called yourself the payroll officer or what was your title?
Well, commissioned officers are called that, commissioned officers, and enlisted men who reach the rank of petty officer are petty officers. Uh, so a petty officer is sort of in the middle. You're really not enlisted, but you're also not commissioned. Now, they offered all of us the chance to go to officer training school, but none of us had any interest. Although we had college degrees and we were eligible, we didn't want to be pilots, Navy pilots, 6 years
Yeah.
commitment, and most of us were married, so we just wanted to do what was required and go home.
So did they give you that job because of like your banking experience? You know how to handle money, or like was that just kind of randomly assigned?
Well, no, that was a big part of it. They tried to place us in positions where we had some aptitude.
So what would your daily routine be at the base or wherever
Well,
you would be?
I almost hate to admit it. When I was on base, I didn't have much to do until just before the payroll period. So the base had numerous movies where it cost a dime to get in. I went to movies all the time. I had seen, many days I spent 3 movies per day.
So what type of movies were you seeing?
Oh, everything under the sun in that time frame. They were.
Do you remember the names?
Well,
Any that I might know?
yeah,
Like
well,
any famous
son,
ones?
let me think about that a minute. None come to mind just because I saw so many as repetitiously, sometimes 3 a day, and I read. Boy, I was zooming through books. We had a fantastic base library. I spent a lot of time in the library. I would read sort of a book a week. So I read a massive number of books because again, on the base, I only worked, well, let's say 3 days a month. The Navy paid monthly. You had the day of payroll, and then I had to calculate what each man was entitled to
Yeah.
based on his rank and seniority and so forth.
And did you have like a calculator to do that, or you just like did it on paper?
Well, yes, we had calculators. Computers hadn't been invented, but we had basic calculators and adding
And did
machines.
it print? It printed the results. Or?
Well, the adding machine did. The adding machine had a tape, but the calculator did not.
How it just displayed it like on like a
Yeah,
little...
just on the screen.
Okay, that's interesting.
It was very basic.
So since you had kind of like an office position, you never really had to like do a bunch of training and like in the movies where like they run around and everything. Did you ever have to do anything like that or?
Well, yes, but there were two parts of it. Of course, we had my buddy Jack and I had already been to boot camp. We went to the naval base in Chicago, uh, and so we'd already had boot camp, so we didn't have to do that over again. And that's a lot of scurrying and fighting fires and doing shipboard
yeah,
things.
how was boot camp?
Well, it was sort of an interesting deal. Uh, Things just were falling in my pocket. financially. Uh, when you're in the Naval Reserve, you had to go to boot camp 2 weeks in the summer. But also, though, every summer you had to go on active duty for 2 weeks. You had to go aboard ship. But we could choose where we wanted to go. We went to California and Washington, D.C., and we went to Cuba. We just chose places that were interesting to us. So at boot camp, though, uh, for whatever reason, we chose Chicago. And the Navy was going to fly us up there. Well, Jack's daddy was with the railroad, so Jack could ride the railroad free. So he wanted to go on a train. I had no interest. Why should I spend a couple of days on a train when I could fly right up there? So he said, okay, I'll do this deal with you. You ride on the train with me, and I will split it with you. Uh, I'll go free, or I'll go at half price and you go at half price. I'll split my freedom pass with you. So we did. So we made big money on it. The Navy paid us for air flights, but we only took the railroad. So we made money
So
off
they just
it.
gave you money and were like, "Oh, buy tickets."
Exactly.
So they didn't buy the tickets for you.
No, you handled it all. In those days, you had great freedom, which
Yeah.
is one of the pluses of it all. That was all very exciting to a couple of young jerks who hadn't done a great deal in life.
So you go to boot camp, and then how long after that are you like in active duty?
Well, it was almost over with. As I recall, we'd been in about 7 years. We thought we were home free.
So you wait. So you did boot camp. How old were you when you went to boot camp?
Well, we were in high school when we did boot camp. And then the years started clicking by, and we went every summer, and we went one weekend a month. And so after grandmother and I were married, I still did the same thing, which was a nice little paycheck on the side. The Navy paid you quarterly. So,
So before they called you, you would still go work from time to time.
well, that's right. In other words, we were living normal lives. I was full time at the bank, developing my career. We were living a normal life, and one weekend a month I would go, and grandmother would do other things while I was gone. See, for every day in the reserve, you got paid 2 days. So we went Friday afternoon. We got 2 days for Friday. Then we got 2 days pay for Saturday. We were only there Sunday morning, and we got 2 days. So we got 6 days pay every time we went on ship, and they paid quarterly. So you got 18 days of pay. That was a nice little check for a young married couple.
So that's kind of crazy. You went to boot camp 7 years before.
Yes,
So
in high school.
so when you went, do you remember boot camp? Like, was it how was that?
Oh, I remember it extremely well because we were very young. We may have been seniors, but we very well might. I'd have to calculate, but we may have been juniors in high school.
Wow.
So we were just kids, and here we were with all these old salty guys who'd been in the Navy lifetime, and they were rough. You can't imagine. They talked a vulgar. I can't pronounce. They were vulgar. We heard this terrible language, and they got drunk all the time. And here we were, these two innocent little guys, never been anywhere. So that was the deal. We were youngsters in high school, and they were old salts.
That's funny. Was it like physically hard? Like,
Yeah, it really was. I mean, you've seen boot camp movies. You you ran on hikes, and you went into these burning structures and put out fires. It was
really?
really, really tough. It was great to be young and physically strong. We were in great shape. Jack was on the track team also, and so we were in shape. We were running and lifting weights, and so we were really tougher than a lot of the guys. They were meaner, but
Yeah.
we were young and healthy.
Did that like really help you get in better shape?
Well, it did, but it was only 2 weeks, so we
Yeah,
survived it and got back home to our high school activities.
that's so cool. So you talked about like having to go to other countries and stuff. How was that? Like when you went to Jamaica and Cuba and stuff?
Well, again, I it was massively fun, except that I kept thinking, oh, I wish grandmother were here with me.
Yeah.
We'd go on tours, and I think, oh, grandmother would love this. So it would have been delightful if grandmother had been with me.
Yeah. How like did you have a favorite country or a favorite place that you visited?
Well, yes, yes, a bunch were great. We went to multiple Caribbean islands, but I like Cuba. It's a gorgeous place, and Jamaica was great.
Yeah.
And then in a later life, grandmother and I took vacations down in the Caribbean, various vacations.
So when you went to Jamaica or Cuba, like what were you doing? You were just on the boat?
Well, the boat would steam in and dock, and then we would have liberty. So my friends and I always stuck together. Those islands can be dangerous places. I mean,
Yeah.
Americans are sitting ducks. So we all stayed together. There'd be from 3 to 5 of us.
Because like because it was you said it was because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So like what were like how was that like when you went on the island like how I don't know, it just that's kind of interesting that like because it seems like they're like a foreign nation that's like
Well,
threatening
it
us.
was
So
mildly scary
yeah.
because we saw Russian ships all the time, and they would try to provoke us. Now we never were in combat. I don't want to give that impression.
Yeah.
I was not shot at, and I didn't shoot.
But did you think it could happen?
Well, yes, because among other things, Russian vessels would try to provoke us, and they would steam right alongside of us. There would be a Russian warship, maybe I don't know what, 20 feet away, and their waves would rock our ship.
So during that time, how would you describe the U.S. Navy versus the Russian Navy? Like, what was it like? Did one have a superior navy, or like, how was that?
Well, yes, the U.S. Was militarily very strong in those days. So yes, we had good navy, and we had a massive
But did
reserve.
they have a similar like? Would they were also
Well,
have
yes,
were
there was a long period of time when the United States and then Russia secondarily were the two strongest militaries in the world.
yeah.
Now, of course, China has risen to the occasion, and they're an awesome, fearsome problem for us right now. But yes, in those days, Russia and the United States were sort of equal. We both had the atom bomb, and
Yeah.
so
So it was like it was pretty scary. Not like oh like they like it was like an even. It was an evenly. They were probably scared as well. You would
well,
say
I
right
think
there.
that's well said, son. We were mildly concerned, but we didn't stay up at night. And
Yeah.
uh, we weren't fearful, but we knew they could shower down on us.
So in the case of an attack, like say you guys were right next to each other and the Russians just open fired, what was like? Did you have like a job or like did you have a role to or like what were you supposed to do
Yes,
in that case?
everyone on ship has a duty station, wartime battle duty station, and so did I. I was in a gunnery crew on deck, and we fired uh, all the time
So
at
you were
target.
on the deck.
Yes, during battle station, U.S. airplanes would fly overhead, and they would pull a target, and we would fire at those targets. So we were skillful on gunnery, and
So how was that gun? Like you all had to control it or like how did that work? Like
well, there were about a dozen men on a gunnery station. The bigger, stronger guys actually loaded the gun. They had big shells in their arms and
so this is like a
hands.
giant artillery type gun.
Well, exactly. On deck. My job was seated and aiming. Uh, there were bigger, tougher, stronger guys than I
So you
was.
actually shot it?
Oh yeah, yeah. We would aim at the targets and perfect our
So if
shooting
so
ability.
if you guys did go into battle, you would have to open fire like on
Well,
the.
exactly.
Wow.
And and you never knew for sure. They would announce on the PA system, all hands to gunnery stations, to battle stations. And so sometimes they would say, this is a drill, this is a drill. But sometimes they'd fake us out. They wanted to keep us on our toes, and they wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
So you didn't know, is this real or is it a drill?
So I think you might have said this earlier, but like, what was your rank or like your position? Like, what would you be called in the Navy?
Okay,
Like,
I would be called a a payroll officer was called a DK, dispersing clerk. So I would be called a petty officer DK. Now, petty officer meant you were an officer, but you were petty.
did you have like a different uniform than like the average?
No, we all had, the only difference was on our sleeve, we had patches that denoted our rank. And it was sort of funny because you had two kinds of patches. One patch showed how long you'd been in the Navy. So we had a patch that showed 4 years. We'd been in the reserve for 4 years. So anyone looking at us would think we'd been in the Navy 4 years, but we were just a petty officer. And so they would think we'd been busted. You'd see these old rough, tough sailors, and they'd been in the Navy 12 years, but they would be a seaman, which was beneath us. They had gotten drunk and caused trouble, and they had been busted in rank so many times, and they hated us.
Yeah.
They thought we were pitiful. We were softies with college degrees and smarties, and they couldn't stand us. And one old guy said one time, he said, I never thought in my life I'd be on a ship with a bunch of college graduates who all had bicycles. He said, I never thought we'd have a bicycle parking lot on the ship.
You guys all had bicycles?
Yeah, well, when we were in fun places, we didn't have cars. Now, ultimately, one of my buddies did go home and get his car. So there was a time when we all rode in.
So they allowed you to park your car on the ship?
Well, no. Car would just be somewhere in. We were stationed in Key West. That was our home port. So this friend, Foster Fauché, fine young Catholic fella, had an old beat up car there in the parking lot. But you could take your bicycle on ship.
Yeah.
Because when we were in Cuba and Jamaica and places, you could pay money and take a tour, which we did, but we had wives and we were trying to be frugal, so we would pedal on our bicycles all around Key West.
So what was like the job of y'all's ship? Like what was the purpose of it?
Well, we were a destroyer escort. So the function of a destroyer escort is to protect a destroyer. And in an attack mode, we took the first shells. An enemy would have to sink the destroyer escorts before they could get through to, sort of like a man running interference for his ball carrier. We
Yeah.
ran interference for carriers. So we had to be able to shoot and do battle. And
Yeah. So
that
y'all were
kind-
like an attack or like a defense ship, like.
Well, exactly.
So you weren't like transporting stuff.
No,
It was
no.
like there was a bunch of guns on the ship. It was like obviously a warship.
Exactly. The only thing we had on board would be provisions for our consumption as well as ships.
Well, do you remember what your ship was called?
Yeah, it was the U.S. 252 DE Crow, C-R-O-W, Destroyer Escort Crow. I don't know where the name came from, but that's what we were.
And like, do you remember like so? Would you always be escorting a destroyer?
Yes, yes. We were stationed in Key West, Florida, but we spent a lot of time in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and so both of those were great ports for large ships.
So, was there one specific destroyer that you were assigned to? Like, did you have like a little fleet of ships, or was it just random? Like,
It was more random. It was like whoever happened to be in port,
yeah.
or we would get the word that a destroyer was headed for a given port, and we would go there for exercise.
And how many American ships would like move at a time? Like, would it be like just you and the destroyer, or would there be more ships? Like,
Well, there was a great extreme. Sometimes we were out at sea by ourselves just for maneuvers and practice, but sometimes there would be a massive number. All that was decided way above our pay grade, so
yeah,
we just did what we were told to do.
that's fun. Well, also, I just want to ask, like, what were you guys doing in Jamaica? Why would you have to go over there?
Well, it was twofold. It was just fun, and
Yeah.
the officers on our ship were reservists also. They were just fellows, a little bit older, not much, but a little bit older than we, who had been in the Navy. They'd gone to officer candidate school or the Naval Academy, and so they wanted to have fun, and so we took a ride on their desire for going to fun places. Plus, we maneuvered all the way. We would shoot and do practice drills. And you had not only you had battle stations, but you had fire control. You had to pretend that you did receive a shell and the side of your ship was injured. So you had to be trained in how to brace the hole and stop the water from coming in. So there was plenty to learn, which we didn't know very well. I mean, those old career sailors thought, "Oh me, if we're ever attacked, we've had it." This bunch of silly reservists.
That's
We,
funny.
we were not all that skillful.
So you guys just went to Jamaica just for fun?
Yeah,
Like, there wasn't a tactical reason to, like,
not really. Well, we drilled, we
yeah,
justified the trip.
yeah,
But Bermuda and Jamaica and various other smaller islands, just
yeah.
whatever we.
Because do you remember like what the government of those places were at the time? Like, were they their own countries, or were they controlled by another country? Or
Well, sadly, son, I was not smart enough to investigate all that.
yeah,
We were young and fairly naive, but a lot of those islands were British protectorates, and some were U.S. protectorates. Cuba was, and we had the naval base at Guantanamo in Cuba.
yeah.
So there were major nations. Some were French origin, French, British Isles, American, just various countries.
But they were mostly like somewhat controlled by another country.
Well, that's right. Either controlled or at least a protectorate.
Yeah,
Some of those islands speak Spanish.
yeah.
Some speak Portuguese. Just various ones.
Like in Jamaica, do they mostly speak English, or what do they speak mostly?
Well, yes, they speak a style of English.
Yeah,
It's heavily accented, and some are better than others. Cuba is interesting. There are people of every national origin that you can think of: Spain, Africa, British Isles. A lot of entrepreneurial type people came to those islands to seek their fortune. So you had everything under the sun.
So in Cuba, you guys had a base. Did the Russians also have a base in Cuba?
No, no, not at that time. Now later, both Russia and China have had outlooks
Yeah.
in Cuba and
How?
other islands. That's one of China's big ambitions right now. They're trying to get a foothold all over the world.
So at that time, how was China like viewed?
China just was not an issue at that time. The challenge and the enemy was Russia.
Yeah.
Uh, Russia began to fall apart under Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, but up until that time, It was a really fearsome enemy.
So the Chinese weren't really relevant until like the 2000s, or do you?
No, that's an interesting history lesson. China was our friend for long, long years. World War II, China was our ally.
Against Japan, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
against Japan. Japan was horrible to the Chinese.
Yeah.
And it, privately, not on tape, but we could talk about all that. It's fantastic that Micah is in Japan right now, and I've encouraged him to do some of the things you just said, learn about their government and their
Yeah.
politics and their economy.
Japan's really cool.
Yeah, Japan is a, they have their problems, but they are a great ally.
Yeah.
South Korea, Japan, the Philippines are really important.
And Taiwan, right?
Oh, Taiwan, absolutely. And you know, Taiwan's a mixed blessing. It's a fabulous ally, but it could suck us into World War III
Yeah.
because it depends who wins this upcoming election, but we could be sucked into World War III if Taiwan is
Yeah.
attacked.
Because do you know the history about Taiwan and all that?
Yes, yes, I do.
It's really fascinating.
It's, you're quite correct. It's totally fascinating. I'm familiar with it partly because that all evolved during the lifetime for grandmother and me.
Yeah.
You know, 88 years, you see some history. But also, though, it's such in current events, and I take some great publications, both paper and magazine. So I do spend a lot of time trying to keep up with, you know, not for grandmother and me. It's substantially over for us.
Yeah.
We're going to be out of here, and we're happy with it. Other than not being with our family, we're ready to get out of here. But for you all, and then for your children, our now existing great grandchildren, we want to keep informed because I'll say, and I know this is sort of a side issue, but your daddy preached a magnificent sermon. Grandmother, I think your dad is one of the greatest preachers we've ever heard, and I mean that
Yeah, me too.
sincerely.
Yeah.
But he preached a sermon where he was talking about the responsibility of grandparents, and the punchline was, God wants you to have influence, but you've got no authority. Grandparents have no authority over any adult, child, or grandchild, but you must have influence. So we wanted to have influence, uh, and so Granddaddy sort of lost his thought there. I
Yeah.
was driving to some great philosophical saying, and I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, though, our family is next to our spiritual life. Our family is the most important thing in the world to grandmother and me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Because do you remember when you started paying attention to current events?
Well, yes, yes. In college, I voted the first time as a freshman.
What election?
Well, it was Eisenhower, and I believe it was his second election.
Wait, so I have no idea about that. So who were like the candidates and what side were they on?
Well, President Eisenhower was very popular with young people. See, being a military man was a great popular thing in those days. Patriotic, and he had handled D-Day, and
Yeah.
so
Because he was in the military, right? He was a general or something.
that's right. General Eisenhower, great in history, supreme commander, D-Day
Yeah.
originator. So I'm not sure I've said the timeline properly. So I voted for him when I was in college. So, you know, I would have been voting age in college and certainly didn't know grandmother at that time. So I voted for Eisenhower. He was conservative and, you know, patriotic, republic, America as a democratic republic.
Who was running against him?
Well, son, I have to confess I don't even remember. Some liberal cuckoo. There always been liberal cuckoos. I never understand it. They're idiots who want to turn this country to socialism. When we got the greatest form of government ever God created. So I'm not sure I even remember your question, but that was my entry into being interested in politics while I was in a minor sense high school, but really big time college.
So you voted in like pretty much all presidential elections since then?
Oh yes, 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 yes. Grandmother and I wouldn't miss a vote. We typically, in the old days, you could vote absentee if you had an excuse. So just to be sure we weren't ill on election day, after a while we started voting, early voting. We voted absentee and by mail. We'd done it all.
So
But we never missed, so never, never.
it, throughout your lifetime, like who has been your favorite president that you've either voted for that's been in office, or maybe you didn't vote for them, but
Well,
they impressed
hands
you?
down, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is my political hero. He was Christian, he was pro life, he was conservative, he was pro America, he was pro middle class. He believed in the American dream.
Yeah.
An old ignorant farm boy could come into the city, work hard, and have a terrific
And
life.
he was president in the 80s, or when was he president?
Oh, son, I'm not smart enough to say it offhand. I know, but I'd have to stop and think. I'd have to start lining up
Yeah.
the dates and presidents. Uh, Ronald Reagan followed the disaster of Carter. I, I remember that carefully because my group had bought Heights State Bank, and Carter was the worst president you could imagine.
Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter.
Oh, really? He wasn't a good president?
Oh, he only had one good thing. He was a devout Christian, and I respected him for that. Well, more than one. He was a devout Christian. He was a good family man. He's one of few presidents that I don't believe cheated on his wife. We had a massive number of presidents,
Every single one.
including Trump.
Yeah.
Trump, Kennedy, Johnson,
Yeah.
Clinton was a disaster.
Yeah.
But staying
Yeah,
on
Clinton.
Carter, trying to answer your question, Carter had what was called stagflation, which is the worst thing that can happen economically. You have massive inflation. The prime rate was 21%. General Motors paid 21% to borrow. So we had inflation and we had depression. The economy was not doing well at all. Well, Ronald Reagan came after that, and he had what's referred to as supply side economics, which means that you cut taxes, you put more money in the pocket of the general public, and they will spend and buy and consume, and all boats will rise, which is true. That's my economic philosophy. Low taxes, empower working people.
Was he president once or twice?
Reagan twice.
And
He won massively.
it was back to back.
Back to back. And son, he not only won the massive popular vote, but he won overwhelmingly the electoral college.
Was it the same person that went up against him both times, or they switched it out?
Well, son, I'd really have to think about it. I'm not, your mom and their daughters have a great joke about Granddaddy, and that is they would ask me about something. The first day, the answer is always no. No, we're not going to do it. But then when I had time to think about it, I said, well, okay, let's do it. So they knew, don't get alarmed. Tomorrow he'll say okay.
Yeah.
So I have to think about things a little bit. I don't like quick decisions. But clearly he defeated Carter.
That was the first election?
Yeah. And here's the second, I don't remember. Well, yeah, I do. Mondale. Cuckoo socialist Mondale. Sticking his head up out of a tank and everybody in the country's laughing at such a goofball socialist liberal. But Reagan to the core was conservative, pro-America, pro-God,
Yeah.
pro-Christianity, pro baby,
Yeah.
pro abortion.
Have you had a least favorite president?
Well, boy, that'd be tough. I have a bunch that are least. Biden is probably my least favorite. He is
Yeah.
socialistic. He's dishonest. On a lifetime of political activity on low income, he is a multimillionaire. He's got massive numbers of houses, expensive beach house.
Yeah.
He has been paid off. He and his boy Hunter, the alcoholic Goofy, they've been paid off by China and Ukraine. They're multimillionaires.
Yeah.
They don't pay their taxes. They're dishonest. And I'll tell you, we criticize Trump for being unfaithful, and he has. Trump is not my spiritual guide. He is strictly political policy.
Yeah.
I don't condone at all his unfaithfulness, all his bad language, and his being immoral with various women. But I'll tell you, he's not. Biden's just been more careful about hiding it.
Yeah.
Biden was unfaithful. He created a divorce in his now current wife. When Biden's wife was dying of cancer, he was unfaithful with a married woman and caused a divorce in her family, which is now his current wife.
Yeah, because she's younger than him, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you just named it. There are very few faithful.
Yeah.
It'd be fantastic if you could get a godly Christian who's also a good president, but it's just not the way it's working out. Carter was a faithful Christian, but he knew nothing about economics, and he almost sunk this country.
Yeah.
So I'd say Biden. I disliked LBJ. Clinton was miserable. So,
What do you think about JFK?
well, he had some good things about him, but he was massively a degenerate. He had naked girls in the White House pool while he was married.
Yeah.
Jackie was going to leave him,
Yeah.
but Kennedy's daddy, Joe, bought her off. He agreed, I will set up a multi-million-dollar trust for you and your children if you won't leave Jack.
Yeah.
So, but Kennedy did understand economics. He was a supply sider. He was cut taxes, free enterprise type fellow. So there were good things.
And he did a lot of civil rights stuff that helped.
That's right.
So that's why he's really popular with my generation because of that.
And I quickly admit his good points. He was. And for that matter, although I disliked Johnson massively, he did some good things in making civil rights correct, in helping disadvantaged folks who had been mistreated. So, with every president, you sort of need to decide, okay, here are the good points, but here are the things that I just can't stand.
So who was running against JFK? Because did you vote? You voted against him?
Well, who was running against him? Son, I'm loving this with you, but I have to confess, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't recall right offhand.
Yeah, that's you don't have to.
If I could just sit and think a minute, I have to sort of line up the presidents and who ran against them. But no, I did not vote for him.
Yeah.
I'll quickly say an interesting thing in developmental in Texas. During my youth and our early marriage, Texas was totally Democrat.
Really?
Which is what I don't understand about your generation. You think of tend to think about Democrats as being pro fairness, pro equal rights. But the Democrats were the ones that were lynching people.
Yeah.
The Democrats were the ones that promoted segregation. They were horrible. The Republicans are the ones that have fought to give equal rights to everybody, and there's a great misconception there.
So you don't believe in the theory of like the party switch?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
For example, Reagan was a strong Democrat, and he saw how evil they are and how stupid and off base they are.
Yeah.
So Reagan converted to Christianity and to the Republican. And we've had lots of conversions.
Yeah.
But one of my great friends, an insurance man named Gene Rankin, and I lived out north where your mama was born, and he and I went to the Republican primary for our district, and Gene and I were the only two Republicans there. We set the agenda. No one was Republican. Everybody was Democrat.
That's crazy.
But I never was. I never was a Democrat.
So you were always a Republican?
Always, always.
And
I could clearly see that the Democrats are anti-American.
when did Texas turn red?
Well, son, it was an evolutionary thing. We made massive turns during Reagan, and we had a governor who was John Conley, and Conley did a switch. See, a lot of current Republicans were originally Democrat, and one of the favorite sayings for Conley and Reagan was, "We didn't leave the Democratic Party; they left us.
Yeah.
We're still what we've always been, but the Democrats left us, so our label now is Republican." So during John Conley, there were massive switches in party affiliation, and so Texas got redder and redder. And in a sense, Texas is what it always was,
Yeah.
but the Democrats just left us. They became liberals and were killing babies in their mama,
Yeah.
and no Christian could who was thinking about it all.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough of all that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because that's another thing. As one of these episodes, I want to kind of like come back and talk to you about politics,
Okay.
just because it's like, I just want what you think about politics to be recorded, because I think that's just interesting for like future generations just to see like what you thought of like stuff at the time. So that'll be a different episode. We'll come back to stuff like this.
Well,
But-
that'd be great. I'd love it. And I don't know, maybe you're getting ready to cut it off. I know you're on
Yeah,
a
next 10 minutes.
time fuse. Well, I'll
we'll-
say this, and I say it particularly to you and Esther and Micah, maybe just the three of you, because you all are yet to decide what your career is going to be and what your life's going to be, and you have some great decisions. A bunch of you fellows have young ladies that you're very interested in, and you're thinking, boy, this very well could be my life partner. So you all have some fabulous decisions to make. And I want to say, for all my grandchildren, I'm so fabulously proud of all of you. You shared your game plan with grandmother and me, and we think you're on target. Everything you said to us,
Yeah.
good idea, smart move. We are so fond of the young women that all of you are considering, Micah and Josiah and you. And we just love the girls y'all are considering. So the thing I'm saying to you is, though, I encourage you, don't make your decision about career till we see what happens in this election. I'm telling you, and I sound like an alarmist, but I believe it with all my heart. If Biden wins, and you're faced with 8 more years of Biden and Cuckoo Harris, this country is going to be a different place, and you all are going to have a disadvantage.
I truly think though Trump's probably gonna win especially because of like he survived the assassination attempt and everything. So yeah. So
Well, son,
yeah.
if the election were now, I totally agree with you. But I will say to you, and I know there are going to be disagreement in my family, but I have to be forthright with you all because I love you. Uh, Democrats are not going to give up easily. They're going to have fraudulent election. They're going to have cheats. They're going to have illegal voting. They're going to pull everything under the sun. So until it's over, I think you're right, but until it's over, I can't get comfortable.
Yeah.
But if you all have fizzling out Biden and then coming on strong, giggling, laughing Kamala, it's going to be a different world. So my point is, though, particularly you and Micah and Esther, you ought to see what's happening politically before you decide on your career. So, because there are some careers where I think you'd be terrific. I think you'd be a terrific teacher. I can see you as a high school teacher. You're clean cut, you're eloquent. Be a marvelous career for you. But if you've got Harris Biden, you have this disadvantage.
Yeah.
You are straight, you're Christian, and you're conservative. And life's not going to be easy for you and Micah and Jonathan because you all have those qualities.
Yeah.
You're straight, you know you're men, and you know you like women, or girls, young girls, in a Christian category. I'm not talking anything off base.
Yeah.
So anyway, you fellas really have to think about it, what you want to do, because I think the law will be out. If Kamala is your president for the upcoming years, I don't think the law is going to be good for you. I don't think being a college professor teaching, because the socialist government is not going to let you teach your heart.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of that, son.
So we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So
All right.
one last question, and try to keep it somewhat brief.
All right.
But I do want to know. This is just I'm interested in your opinion about this. But what do you think about RFK or independent presidential candidates and how have you thought about them throughout the years as well?
All right. Easy for me to say. Being a man of few words, concisely spoken.
Yeah.
There are some good things about him. He has some good policy.
Yeah.
But in some areas, he's absolutely cuckoo.
Yeah.
He is a liberal. I mean,
but he's more of a classic liberal and less of a progressive. So
yeah, don't let him fake you out. There's some good things about him.
Yeah.
And I've already confessed to you. I think with every president, you got to be fair. Admit their their strong suit, but know their weaknesses. And even Trump, I tell you, he disappoints me in many, many areas.
Yeah.
But his policies are good. RFK, I'm hoping he works to our advantage. I'm hoping some of these cuckoo liberals would vote for him.
Yeah.
Or stay home. And that would encourage the vote for Trump. But he has some good features. I like some things about him.
Yeah.
But I would not want him to be. I'd rather have him than Biden.
Yeah.
If I only had two choices, Kennedy, Biden, hands down, I'd say Kennedy.
Yeah. I just like Kennedy just because of he's actually he's not senile and he's not crazy like Trump. So because my generation really likes him.
And so, I understand that.
Because he's he kind of caters to us.
And I understand why. And if I were your age, I'd probably like him more.
Yeah.
But I like him.
Yeah.
I like him way better than Biden. But he is bottom rung as it relates to Trump because policy.
Yeah.
Strictly policy. Now, I'm not talking Christianity and morals. And, I wish Mike Pence were president. He's smart and he's a great Christian.
No, he was a great vice president because he also just looks and sounds like a president.
I would vote for him for president in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I would vote for DeSantis. I like him. I mean, there are lots of good people out there.
What's the guy's name? Vivek or he's the Indian guy. What do you think about him?
Well, I would say almost the same as I've said about Kennedy. I like a bunch of things about him.
Yeah.
And underneath Trump, I would vote for him for president. He has a lot of good policy, but there are some worrisome things about him. Obviously, he's not Christian.
Yeah.
I think immoral. It appears he's a good family man. So there are a lot of good things about him, but he's off base on a few issues.
Yeah.
But in the main, I like him very
Because
much.
a lot of people in my generation wanted him to be vice president, and people were like really disappointed at my age because I don't know. He also caters to like young people, but
Well,
so does JD Vance is young too, so it's not
yes,
a bad.
he is.
It's not
Well,
a bad issue.
I think for your generation, Vance is a great choice and a great selection.
Yeah.
But son, I'll say this, and you all are going to think I am so narrow-minded, and I understand,
Yeah.
and that's fine. That's fine. Y'all are entitled to your opinions on every subject, and grandmother and I will always back you and sponsor you and
Yeah.
and have respect for your decisions. But son, for me to vote for a person who is a dedicated non-Christian, Muhammad. I left a doctor because I liked him as a doctor, but his name was Muhammad Attar, and I don't want any guy operating on me who worships Muhammad, only Jesus.
Yeah.
So I don't. I voted for some people who were not dedicated Christians, but they believed in God and they knew who Jesus was, and they had some measure of interest in Christianity. I can't vote for a dedicated non-Christian.
Yeah.
I just can't.
No, I understand that. That's
For
totally,
for one thing,
yeah.
killing babies.
Yeah.
I mean, because of my love for all you and all these great grandchildren, anybody that harms a baby is not on
Yeah.
my list.
Well, we'll wrap it up. We've gone over.
Well,
But-
son, thank you, and I'm sorry I've rambled so much.
No, it's interesting to hear about your political views, just because, it's just you're from a different time, so you have like different insight versus like, I don't know. It's just I think it's beautiful to see all generations think, because it's like we all are probably wrong a little bit. So like we'll probably like it's good to like talk to like different
I'm not
generations
saying
talk.
that, son. I'm not saying you're wrong, and I am saying I respect you. I
Yeah.
understand, and you're entitled to your opinion. I do encourage you, think deeply, analyze every day, develop your Christianity, develop your career, develop your political life. Be attentive to all those areas.
So we kind of got a little sidetracked today.
A little bit.
But we did talk about you marrying and meeting grandmother, and we did talk about you in the Navy. So next time, we'll talk about this. Next time, because it'll be the next decade. So we'll talk about all your children, them being born, and we'll talk about your career more. We'll go into depth about your career. And so that'll be next episode.
All right. I love talking to my girls and grandmother. Those are my favorite subjects. And the variance is my fault, son. Your questions have been terrific, and I am a rambler. I'm not a man of few words.
No, it's good. It's good just to talk about anything.
All right.
So.
Thank you, son.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So we'll see you next time.
Good.